My name is Randy Howell, and you're listening to the Faith and Fishing Podcast.
Welcome to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam.
And I'm Robert. In every episode, we're bringing you faith stories and fishing memories from some amazing members of the fishing community.
So join us as we shed a positive light on all things faith and fishing.
Hey guys, welcome to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. This is Robert. Usually Cam is doing this part, but he is having a little hiatus tonight, so I'm going to be rolling solo. But luckily we've got a great guest that's going to come in and do the deal because he's used to just really flying by the seat of his pants as well. So really, I guess kind of a recap. Last week's show, was the end of A.K.A. All that stuff got wrapped up. If you guys didn't check out, I am going to touch base on the Tackle Talk podcast, Andrew Hayes. If you guys didn't check out his A.K.A. wrap up, it's basically a 2-hour podcast that touches on almost every product from A.K.A. It's a really, really great listen. So listen to that. And we're going to talk about that some tonight. We're going to talk about a little bit of tournament angling, and we're going to do that with none other than Paul Heels, the Jabber Hammer himself. So you guys welcome Paul Heels to the show.
Hey, I know it ain't my podcast, but I got to come in with the glass breaking, busting through like the Kool-Aid man. So here I am.
Yeah, man, that's it. I would kind of have been disappointed if we didn't get a hey-o out of it. So that worked out good. How you been doing, man?
Pretty good. Mainly from the fishing side, not so wonderfully great. Kind of in the same boat you are. I haven't been fishing quite as much as I had been last year. But work, business, all that is taking up more time, which is a good thing. Hopefully in about a year or so, it'll be where I can do more fishing. Outside of that, man, just living life, raising 2 kids, keeping the wife happy, doing some fishing, running a business.
I hear you. So for those of you that don't know, Cam, myself, and Paul all live within probably miles of each other. And we fish some of the same trails, so our paths cross quite often. So I'm pretty familiar with Paul as an angler and also as a fisher because I listen to his Bass and Brews podcast. And but for those of our listeners that don't know, give us a little rundown of who Paul Heels is. You can touch a little bit on the podcast and then a little bit about your fishing and how you got started in that.
All right. Yeah, look, I could go on for days. I've done a bunch of stuff, been a lot of places, and but to tie it down, we'll start with the podcast. We have Bass and Brews podcast. It is not safe for work. It is it's different. What we tell folks when we reach out to them that maybe have never listened to it is, we're sitting around a campfire after a long day of fishing, kind of, talking, shooting the shizzle, sitting back, relaxing, telling stories. So that's what the podcast is. It's laid back. There's not a lot of questions that we have pre-written except for the shotgun round. I co-host with Alex. His name is, I can't pronounce it because I'm country, and his name is Pacific Northwestern. I call him Alex Castanuega, but I think it's Castangue. Swamp rat fishing, if you follow him on the social media. And he started it. I was a guest on episode, I think it was 9 or 12. I forgot now. It's a shame. It was only about a year ago. They asked me to co-host, and we've been co-hosting since. He was in the active Coast Guard, was gone for a while, so it was just me. So I know how you feel today, being in the hot seat, having to run everything when, you're the pretty face that shows up and has a good time, not in charge of anything. And he got back, and we've just been running with this. It's just a laid-back, fun podcast. That's what we want it to be. It's not one that you probably need to be listening to with your volume on high. You probably need earplugs. But it's a great time. We do focus on the fishing industry, the outdoor industry, and we've met some great people through that. Obviously, I've met y'all through being here local, but the funniest story is that I knew Cam's podcast before I started on Bass and Brews, from just searching podcasts when I started fishing in the Raleigh area, and I found this one, and I had been listening to it, and I was up at the Outhouse Bait and Tackle. This would have been 2021, maybe. I can't remember exactly. 2021, somewhere in there, mid spring, late or early summer. Anyway, I'm in there. There's the guy behind the desk, another guy walking around. And I talked to the guy behind the desk, and I hear is that Paul Heels? And I'd be doggone if it's not Cam. And he recognized my voice from our podcast. And so when this me, who are you? I said, yeah, I'm Cam, Faith and Fishn podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. So that's how Cam and I met for the first time in person. Was that way. The point of my long story, look, I'm long-winded now. I'll talk beers off Billy Goat. The podcasting, being in podcasting, has really facilitated a lot of relationships for Alex and I. And, we've been able to build on that. But if Cam and I had not been in Outhouse Tackle and listened to each other's podcast before that day, we would have just walked by each other and said, hey man, how's fishing? But here we are, having made that relationship. Yep. And that's how him and I got connected, started talking and shared numbers. And then you and I just did it from the regular way, being on the water, talking a little bit of junk before we, launched that morning.
Yeah, exactly. I think we fished a tournament together before we ever knew who each other was. I think you fished that first tournament on Harris Lake when it was like sub-zero, it felt like that day. I don't know if you remember that or not. I think that was one of your first tournaments. That was my first tournament. And I think there was a total of like 45 anglers, and there were a total of 3 fish caught that day. And ice was hanging off of everybody's kayaks that you couldn't get the line to go through the guides because ice was building up on the guides of the lines. And I was in a Ascend H12, which is basically like a damn canoe, fishing out of that thing, and afraid I was going to sink it. And it's a wonder that I didn't. But that was, I think, the first time we didn't know each other a little bit more. But see if you give us a little bit of background on your fishing and how you got started in that.
Background on fishing. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina called McBee. M-C, big B-E-E. McBee, South Carolina. If you get on Highway 1 here out of Raleigh, head straight south, about 2.5 hours, you'll hit a little town called McBee. You're going to see A.A. Smith water heaters, McLeod's Peaches. That's about it. If you blink, you're through it. And in that area, it's pretty much all farmland. In that area, there's a ton of ponds. My family had a pond, or had a farm that had a couple ponds on it. One was the hog pond, and it was called the hog pond because part of the pond was the fence for the hogs, for the rearing hogs. And so they would get down there and waller in the pond. It was a small one, but it was in this area, South Carolina, Chesterfield County. It's black water, sweet tea, tannic, pine tree, acidic water. So is that sweet tea water looks dark, but it's clear. and it had jackfish, it had brim, bass, and a little bit of everything in between. Had some sucker fish out in there. So I started fishing there. Grandpa took me when I was, 4 or 5 years old. And he was a peach farmer. Now, he didn't have time to be taking me out there fishing. And it was the middle of summer. They were actually running the irrigation pump out of that pond. And we went out there, and I had, now it's a Snoop. 30 years ago, it was a Snoopy reel. Now it's a Spider-Man reel and a Barbie reel and all that. But mine there was no superhero attached to it. It was just like a light blue clear rod and I think a navy blue reel. I don't know. Took it out there, took some worms. I caught a bass. I think the bass was like 5-6 pounds. I'm pretty sure it was barely a pound. But, I undiagnosed ADHD. I pitched a fit until we took it home and cooked it, literally. Like, we caught that fish. I don't even know how long we were out there. It wasn't that long. But they broke off a branch. Pawpaw broke off a branch, run it through his gills, put it in a bucket in his truck. We took it home, and I made him cook it, and we ate it. So that was my intro to fishing, and after that, I was obsessed with it. My dad really didn't know anything about fishing. He had some guys he worked with that knew some. We were lucky in the fact that we had tons of those, small farm ponds to decent size, 15, 20 acre ponds locally that we could take a little John boat in, a little beat up trolling motor. And my dad took me fishing and learned, and we learned, and then I got into it and Bassmaster and watching stuff on the weekends and finding the people that fish there locally. Cause we do have, we weren't far from Murray and Santee and some of those big lakes, and some of the guys in our town fish back then used to be the Redmans. And I just started learning and getting into it, and that catapulted me into, wanting to be a professional angler, of course, right? Well, I also played sports in high school, and I fished every day I could. Lucky, had opportunities to go to all these ponds locally. Never a day I couldn't go fish. I had a little John boat with a little trolling motor on it, built a little deck on front. So, I had the stuff to be able to go out there and do that, those opportunities. Graduated high school, head off to college to play football. Fishing ends. And it ends for, I think, about 4 years until I was done with football and most of my schooling. And I was living in Mebane, North Carolina, and hopped into the Burlington Bassmaster Club there. As a non-boater, I think I was one of 2 or 3. And back then, you competed with everybody. There was only 2 or 3 of us anyway. But you paid your entry fees. You competed with everybody. And I kind of got just thrown around in whose boat I was going to be in that week, and ended up getting to fish with the president at the time a good bit, Robbie. And I kept in touch with him still, and I'll circle back to Robbie. But he's probably one of the best anglers I've ever been in a boat with at that point in time. I mean, he was just, from coming from a sports background and seeing how people were dialed in and seeing, the innate ability to make decisions based off of feeling, right? He's one of the best I've ever been. And then when you get into the technical side, like the casting and the colors and where we're fishing and why and all this and that, he was still up there. He's a really, really good angler. So spent that couple seasons and then moved to South Carolina and was back in my hometown-ish. Started doing a lot of fishing in those little ponds again. Bought me a little small project bass boat because I was at Lake Robinson, which is a miniature Sharon Harris, except there is a hot water discharge at Lake Robinson. And about being there a year, we moved to the Aiken, South Carolina area, and my fishing stopped. And this was February of 2009. Fishing stopped. Nothing. I'm right there at Clark's Hill now. I'm 30 minutes from Clark's Hill. I'm an hour and a half from Santee. I'm less than 2 hours maybe to, at this point in time, to Murray. I'm in a Mecca, but it was a new job. It was a wildland firefighter job. Bass and Brews people right now be taking a drink. But it's a wildland firefighter job, and just family life, everything that stopped. That was it. I went around, we ended up moving to North Augusta, which is on the Savannah River, bought some ultralight poles, and we go, fart around on the Savannah River in these our little junky kayaks we had. Not real fishing at all. Go with my dad where he lives a little bit. But that was, 12 years pretty much of a fishing hiatus. And then we moved 2019. We moved here back to Raleigh. And in December of 2020, I told my wife, I said, I don't want any hobbies. I want to go back to doing fishing. I got all this fishing gear. I love fishing. So it's one of the hobbies I've loved my entire life. I want to go back to fishing. We've got Sharon Harris 15 minutes away, Jordan 20 to 30 minutes away, and Falls. Even though I hate Falls, I didn't name Falls back then either. I knew something. So I had it's a decent kayak. It's a Avalon 120. It was a high dollar Walmart kayak. It's made by Sun Dolphin, but it's a high dollar one. It had the gel seat. It had the 2 rod holders. But actually, I'll tell you what, it's a really good kayak. It paddles straight as an arrow. And yeah, I couldn't stand up in it because I'm a big, hefty boy. But it was fun on the river. It was good. I took it out to Harris a few times. It was like, nope, ain't no way. I will die on this lake in this kayak. And so that would have been December 2020 when I told her that, really started going out there fishing. And January started looking for a new kayak and found a Hobie. And so to circle it all in, got to bring up Robbie, El Presidente, as I called him, of the Burlington Bassmaster Club. I hollered at him in October, November, and went fishing with him a couple times. He's over in that Graham area. So we went to Graham Ebbin Lake and fished a couple times and got to, after how many every year? 15 years. No, 16 years. 15, 16 years. Got to, get in his bullet boat and got to fish a little bit. February 2021, I got my Hobie. And that's where I really dove into it, started the kayak fishing clubs around here. Your story is 100% right. That's where we met. It was 19 degrees when we launched at Sharon Harris in February of 2021 for CCKF's first official inaugural event. It was rough. There were, I think your numbers are a little off. There were 70 something people. There were 6 fish caught by 6 anglers. Hank Vajon won big fish and the tournament off of one fish. It was like a 21-incher that he caught shallow, dragging a jig out there past the bridge to go the craziest way to catch one then. But yeah, that was my entry into it. I'd done a lot of fishing before that on mainly Sharon Harris and had hooked up with like Matt Dunn and gone out with him some. But that's my story. That's my journey of when I was born to where we pretty much are today, still fishing out the Hobie PA-14. Couple few upgrades here and there. I bought a lot more equipment, but that's the circle of life that's brought me to where I am right now in the fishing side.
Well, that's I knew most of that, but every time I hear you tell those stories, you're such a good storyteller. And, to hear, all of that for our listeners is a pretty cool thing. And we're going to play a couple ads, and then we're going to get into some of that storytelling and that your podcasting and the entertainment value that you bring to whatever podcast or show that you're on, or whatever lake you're fishing, and the pre-fishing when you're just sitting there or whatever. It's always entertaining. So let's play these couple ads and then we'll be right back and we'll talk about that.
Few things ruin your day on the water as bad as losing gear. But with the retrieval devices for fishing rods, action cams, bow fishing bows, and more from Save Your Outdoors, you don't have to let dropping your stuff ruin your day because you can get it back. The pressure-sensitive filter keeps water from rain and quick dips in the water out, but it lets water in when your gear goes overboard to release a float attached to your gear by 60 feet of line so you can get it back. Go to saviouroutdoors.com to learn more and try some for yourself, and use promo code FNFP15 to save 15% on your order. That's saviouroutdoors.com and promo code FNFP15.
A huge selection and crazy fast shipping is already enough to turn heads as an online tackle shop, but Omnia Fishing sets themselves apart with their ambassador program. With Omnia, you can send in fishing reports for your local lakes that recommend baits, structure, tactics, and gear. And when another angler takes your advice and purchases something from your report, you get credit for it to spend at Omnia. The best part means that with Omnia Fishing, you can shop by lake and purchase baits and gear that are proven to work where you're fishing. To get started, go to omniafishing.com and use promo code FNF15 to save 15% on your first order. All right. For those of you guys that are watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, if you hear the audio or video go in and out, I am on whatever laptop that I grabbed out of the office because Cam wasn't going to be here. So it is probably not quite as quick as a computer as what we normally are running. So if you hear that skip a beat, that's why. But just hang in there with us, and I promise it is going to be worth it. But the big is just your entertainment value. And so I want you to, talk a little bit about, have you always been in that way? And then, are you thinking about that the whole time, or is that something that just comes natural for you? Because a lot of people in the entertainment business wish they had just that what you have. So touch on that some, and then I have a football question after that.
That's an interesting question. The easy or the quick answer is yes. I've kind of always been. Growing up, we'll call it the class clown. I was, I like to make people laugh, like to pick and joke. Growing up in the country, if you didn't have a nickname or 10, or if people didn't pick on you, they didn't like you. I mean, that's what it was. And, sometimes it teetered on bullying, but in general, where I grew up, it was a lot of picking and a lot of joking. And, I was a wild little kid. Again, I say this, my son is diagnosed with ADHD, and I see how he acts, some of the challenges he has, but his personality and who he is, he's never met a stranger, some of these things that come out. So, I've self-diagnosed myself through my son's diagnosis, and it's a lot of things started to make sense, but I have never met a stranger. I love to talk to anyone and everybody. Very, very curious. I love to hear about people's journey of what has brought them to where they are today. The history of where they're from. I love meeting people from other countries and stuff like that, because I want to hear about how they grew up and the foods. I love food. I've gained a lot of weight here recently because I love food. So I want to hear about that. The personality and like having a good time and stuff like that I would say is inherent to me. I guess I inherited it from somebody in my family, but nobody's got it quite like me, with the exception of my grandma, Mimi, who's died a few years ago. But Mimi was the life of the party. College, after football games, I'd have to tell guys like, hold on, before we go out, and we would go out and have a good time and, hit Franklin Street. I said, hold on, y'all, we got to wait on Mimi. And at first, folks were like, your grandma? It's like, yeah, we got to wait on Mimi now. It's fine. We'll have a good time. And Mimi would be out there with us the whole night, and, people loved her. So I probably inherited that from her. But for me, it's really what it comes down to me, for me, and in the podcasting aspect of it, is I really, really, really want to hear and am intrigued by everyone's story and journey. That's what I enjoy. And then Alex calls it our special brand of BS, our Bass and Brews special brand of BS. And it's where we get off on these side tangents that just have nothing to do with, what we're talking about at the time, and then we can bring it back in. So for us, the entertainment value comes from the story that our guest is telling. And we tell folks when they're on our podcast, in the green room, in the back, we got a few rules that we go over, but we always tell them, it's like, this is your podcast. Alex and I are just here to hit buttons and make stuff run. And the rest of it is yours, until the end. There's nothing scripted. So you're leading us to ask questions. It's your podcast. And what we've seen is that's opened people up. You can kind of see them sit back and be a little more relaxed. And that's where the entertainment actually comes into play, is because, for Alex and I, we're not that funny. I mean, in the end, together for 2 hours and our episodes are long, it would get pretty boring for us, because all we really do is I tell short jokes on him. He calls me fat. And then, we're not good enough anglers to really talk about fishing or techniques or lures or anything. I mean, literally, it would just be a terrible podcast. But that's where our guest comes in, and that's, it's your podcast, you roll with it. And for us, that's how the entertainment comes in, because then Alex and I can do our little shindigs, but it's the guests that we put into that. And it wasn't quite like that when we started that podcast. Alex started it initially, and it was 45 minutes on the dot. He had questions. It was question, answer, question, answer. I came on like 2+ hours later. It was, debauchery shenanigans. And then he brought me on. And kind of the evolution of it was when he had to go on his tours for the Coast Guard and I was in charge, I completely wrecked everything and just turned it into these long form podcasts that we started seeing people like. But that was not on purpose. We're doing what we're doing now. We would start the podcast and just sit there and talk, and it would just keep going. And as long as the guest was interested, and as long as they were engaged, we just kept going. And so we followed that formula for what we've continued to do, and kind of bringing it back to how I am. And if I was always like that, yes. Said earlier, I talk the ears off Billy Goat, talk all day long. I will talk to this chalkboard behind me and these little stuffed animals and stuff behind me. Alex can rein us in a lot of times. He's the calming force, obviously military, so he brings it in. So we work well together on that aspect, because I will go into the guest is like, man, I think I'm done. I'm like, great, this is awesome, let's end it.
Yeah, so I've followed that podcast since really a couple episodes before you got on there. I started listening around Mesa, and then he had one as a guest, and then had you on as a guest host a couple of times, I think, and then kind of started where it was at. And then, like you said, he went off and did his thing with the Coast Guard, and you kind of, ran the show and, made it a little bit longer. But that is probably the most, my favorite podcast to listen to. And just because you don't have to, you can just hit play and it's going to be a couple hours, and you don't have to search for the next podcast, and it's always entertaining. So that is one of my, I had a football question for you, and play will punter for them. And so I played football in high school. I chose not to play in college because it would have been at probably a D3 level, and they were going to give me half of a scholarship for a $40,000 school, which did me absolutely no good. I would still have to come up with the other $20,000. So I checked out of football after high school. But knowing how football players are and knowing how big your personality is, a lot of times the football players will poke the kickers in the ribs and will just, kind of dog the kickers out. So talk a little bit about being a kicker at a D1 school with a personality as big as personality as you have, and kind of some of the things you went through with that, or did that just kind of, help you be kind of the entertainer that you are, because you had to deflect some of those probably big running backs and linebackers and linemen?
I was a punter, not a kicker. I couldn't kick in high school. I was a quarterback. I never came off the field. Again, small high school. Most people ever had on a high school football team was 18 people. I never came off the field. I was a quarterback. I was a linebacker, safety. I punted, starting in Pee Wee football because nobody else could. I got decent at it, but I couldn't kick. Funny story, if you go back and listen to one of our previous episodes this year, we had Coach Andre Powell, who's a running back special teams coach for University of Pitt, on. And, it's funny. He asked me, we had this JV game and that we were playing in this, the backups and walk-ons and stuff. And I was a walk-on, y'all. I paid to play. I had to pay to go to school. I paid to play football. I was a walk-on. But he asked me to kick. I was like, Coach, I can't kick. He's like, what? You can't kick? I was like, I'm a punter. Not a kicker. Anyway, so yeah, we got to get terminology right. As a punter, not a kicker. The funny thing is you hear about the kickers being off on their own and like just whatever. And that's true in a lot of scenarios when I played. Now it's probably still the same, very similar. And my first year there, it was like that. But, our starters that were on that team were awesome guys, and they were in tune with the program. And so we didn't have that really disconnect. For some of the younger guys, yes. Well, our second year, we got new coaching staff in, and it was not like that. I'll try to make this short as possible. Again, I wanted to play special teams. That was the quickest way I saw myself getting on the field. Kickoff return, punt block, stuff like that. So I went and told the coaches, like, hey, I want to move to like safety so I can start being in these things. I'll still do the kick, the punting, and all the stuff I got to do there, but I want to play safety. I want to be on the scout team, So I started lifting, with our combos, which are linebackers and fullback group. I ran with the defensive backs. I'm a 6'1", slow. On a good day with some wind, if the field's a little downhill, I'm maybe 4'9", but I push myself. I like that. I tell people I'm a little too dumb to know when to quit. So I did all that, and I was a scout team linebacker for 3 years. And 2 of those 3 years, I was also the backup punter. So I was on the special teams. We would line up to do punt block against, the number ones, and I would be over there trying to block. John Lafferty was who I backed up. I'd be trying to block his punts, and then when we switch, it'd be the number twos. I would be back there punting. So when we did that, though, when we got that new coaching staff in, they treated us a lot different. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Some other folks didn't. But people got sent to us for punishment because Tuesdays and Wednesdays practices and Monday practices, the stuff that we were doing was not really fun. It wasn't sitting around, farting around, on the field off to the side, forgotten about. We were there. I enjoyed that aspect of it because, felt like you were a part of the team. You just weren't out there, people talking junk about you as a kicker. You were part of the team. They respected you. You earned that respect by, the stuff you did in practice. And so when the personality comes into play is, yes, when you're on a team at a Division I program, you've got you've got guys that are going to be in the NFL. I mean, it's 120 guys when I played, give or take a couple. There's a lot of personalities, and there's a lot of big personalities. And one of the things I learned through that was just being yourself too, because they come from a lot of different walks of life. If you've never been in a locker room with 120 guys, 18 to 23 years old, it's hard to explain. There's the personalities, there's the walks of life. You know, there were people that had, with the exception of traveling to play sports, have probably never been out of their county, more or less got on a plane and flown to Arizona or Oklahoma or Texas. And so you get all these big personalities, you get all these different walks of life in there, and you're able to really, the college years, right? Not just football, but college in general, you kind of get to find yourself and to find your voice. That was one of the things that helped me find my voice and be able to kind of release it and have a good time and have fun. And it's hard to articulate at times, but who I was who I was. It probably just got amped up a little bit more. You know, when you get out there and you know, you gotta, you want to talk junk with the guys, even though you will never see the NFL and the guy maybe you're across there who's blocking you, a running back that you're on a linebacker and you have to blitz and he's blocking you, and you know they're talking junk to you. You want to talk junk back to them. Your buddies in all the end, but you're never. I know I was never going anywhere past being, you know, a number 2 punter or a scout team linebacker. Let's be real. I knew that. But those guys, I still wanted the respect. So the personality and just playing as hard as I could, that's all I wanted to do from a football standpoint. And, you know, I will say, leading into that, kind of how I am at the boat ramp after tournaments, before tournaments. I'm not necessarily loud and obnoxious, but like I like to talk to people, and the people that I know really well, I like to jab them. I like to, you know, talk a little bit of junk to them and ask them how they're doing. You know, I just like to talk to people. I like to see how they're doing. We don't necessarily, because in the kayak world, because we're launching at different ramps, we don't get to see each other all the time. And not everybody can show up at the LinkedIn's. And yes, I said LinkedIn. It's not a weigh-in because we don't weigh nothing. It's a LinkedIn. Nobody's catching on to this. Why is nobody catching on to LinkedIn's? Why are we still, Vinny, Queen City, y'all quit calling it a weigh-in. He hates it when I call it a LinkedIn. It is a LinkedIn. Anyway, let me see, Alex ain't here. Robert, you got to bring me back, man. When I start running off in the left field, you got to reel me back in now. Throw your grappling.
I guided you to left field with the football question. So that's just something that I was interested in, because I played football from the time I was 5 until my senior year. So, you know, the game of football is a game that to me is like no other. And it is a team building sport really like no other, because you have so many different pieces of the puzzle and you have so many guys on that team. It's not like a baseball team where you have 12, 15 guys. It's like you said, you have, you know, I mean, there was probably 70 on our high school team, but you get into the college level, you know, you're talking over rosters over 100, and just the dynamics of it and the different positions. And, you know, that's one thing I always wondered, being a punter and your personality, and kind of how, you know, how that worked for you. But that's kind of what I suspected. I'm going to play a couple more ads, and then I got another question, and then we'll go from there.
If a fly rod is your weapon of choice, check out A.K.A. Their Fly Caddy is the most convenient way to get your favorite flies to the water, or just keep them handy by clipping it to your hat, truck visor, backpack, rod case, or just whatever. You can also bundle it up with flies from independent fly tires that A.K.A. has teamed up with through their Fly Light project. Choose from bundles specializing in redfish, carp, saltwater, or freshwater. Head over to atollas.co, that's ATOLLAS.co, to get your fly caddy today and use promo code faithnfish15 to save 15% on your order. That's faith the letter N, fish the number 15 at checkout for 15% off.
Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle is one of the largest canoe, kayak, and cycling retailers in the Southeast with a huge selection of kayaks, canoes, bikes, and all the accessories needed to experience paddling and cycling comfortably and safely. Get Outdoors helps to expand and educate the paddling community through their free demos held on local lakes in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and through in-store clinics and on-the-water courses and demos. And we'll even get your new boat rigged up for kayak fishing for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or check out shopgetoutdoors.com to be wowed by their selection. All right. So I've got more question or comment, and then we'll kind of, I want to hear a little bit about your faith story as well. But before we get into the faith side of it, I started doing a kayak fishing spotlight. And I'm really trying to spotlight some different content creators. And I've always heard you on all your podcasts talk about the Paddler's Playbook. So I never really listened to Drew and those guys a whole lot. I did listen to it a couple times, a few years back, but I really have started listening to more of that. And the Paddler's Playbook, and it just seems like you were a guest on there not long ago. Maybe it's been a couple weeks, but you and Alex mesh pretty well. And I also heard Alex was on there not too long ago too. But really, you, Drew, and Alex, man, you guys make a pretty good pairs and the different pairs. And it seems like you guys really hit it off, and I enjoy those podcasts. Just to speak a little bit to like your relationship with Drew and the Paddler's Playbook, and how much you enjoy doing that, and maybe getting together with different podcasters and stuff like that.
Alex jokes. I don't know if he said it on our last one, but usually he jokes that he's going to fire me. He's got open invitation for resumes for a guest co-host. I'm not sure anybody else could put up with Alex besides me. But when he did his episode with Drew, I messaged him after that. I said, man, y'all were like tea and sugar. I mean, somebody poured y'all in a bowl and stirred you up, and we're sitting around Grammy's table on Sunday supper, eating mashed taters and homemade meatloaf and probably some homemade cat head biscuits and drinking sweet tea, which was y'all. I mean, it was just amazing. They did do a good job. I told both of them that stuff. And to talk about Alex and I's relationship in life, sometimes you just have it. Maybe it's your wife, maybe it's a friend, Nowadays, it can be somebody over social media that you've never met and may never meet. Sometimes you just have that connection where your personalities line up. And Alex and I have a lot of similar thoughts, but we also do things a little bit differently. What has made us work well together, though, is when one of us, so our podcast is 99% guest driven. And you talked about content creators. That's who we pull in. Almost all of our guests are content creators. The majority are anglers of some sort, or at least in the outdoor world, but they are content creators. And they don't have to be the big dogs. They don't have to be, 500,000 followers on TikTok or, 100,000 on YouTube or whatever it is. I mean, we've had them the full range of 100. We don't care. If we like your stuff, we want to have you on and talk to you. See, now my ADD just kicked in because now I got on one thing with content creators. I forgot what I was saying about me and Alex. But anyway, me and Alex, I know what it was now. So Alex and I have a really good ability to understand when a guest fits into who we are, and me backing off and letting Alex run that podcast, or him backing off. The one that comes out, so you're probably listening to this when y'all are listening to this, our episode already dropped on Friday, which would be the 28th. That one, we had Matty Ice, Black Flag Outdoors. Alex, this was not Alex's cup of tea. He was stressed out the whole day because me and Matty Ice were just all over the place. Not his cup of tea. But anyway, Alex took a step back, and we've had these opportunities, or we've had these guests on where we understand to do that. Drew and I have known each other for a while because, when I started in 2020, I started kayak bass fishing. I tried to get into some of the local clubs. A bunch of them wouldn't take non-boaters. The other one didn't have enough non-boaters that you could compete but anyway, just wasn't. I'd found some people with kayaks, getting off topic. But with Drew, when I started searching for kayak fishing podcasts, they're one of the first ones that came up. They're a saltwater fishing podcast primarily out of Southeast Texas. But I was just, trying to search. And when I'd listen to an episode, I'd usually give them 2 or 3 episodes. If they didn't like it, I'd, get rid of it. But there's not a lot of kayak fishing podcasts out there. Anyway, I got into theirs and started listening. At the time, he had a co-host, Chris, and it was really interesting. It was fun. It was kind of that laid-back, conversation-driven podcast. Had no business listening to it. It was saltwater fishing. I do some surf fishing, but that's it. But we created a relationship over time, and again, through podcasting. That's why I love podcasts. So I love social media. You can facilitate these relationships. And I was befuddled when Alex let me on his podcast. I mean, he was like episode 9, 8 episodes in. I'm like, hey man, if you ever need a crappy guest just to fill in, I'm available. He's like, well, as a matter of fact, I need one next week. And we had to push it a week out. But anyway, the podcasting and social media has connected a lot of dots for me. And Drew was one of those. What I would say is to your point about you're saying Drew and I and Drew and Alex and all 3 of us kind of mesh well together. The best way that I can explain that is that we understand when we're talking to people or when we're interviewing people, we understand if we're there with somebody else, kind of when to shut up and when to talk. Now, I'm a super interrupter because, again, we go back to the ADD. Look, if sometimes I just got to say it just so the people that are on the other side of the microphones can remember it for me. Because I try to make notes, but sometimes I can't read them because I'm trying to listen and talk and read at the same time. So, I'm a habitual interrupter, and especially with Alex, but I do that on purpose. But, what it comes down to is like, there's a couple things. We get well together because we know when to shut up. The other thing is we kind of know when to let our guests just run with it. You can ask that one question and right away, good podcasters will ask a question or 2 and they'll go, they're there. I got it. And then the guest just rolls, and all you have to do is fill in. There are always these little blanks, and you just have to say, "Hey, well, what about this?" And you fill in that little blank, and they go. So we're able to do that as guests, as co-hosts, or when we're guests on each other's podcasts. Because I'll tell you, it's fun. It's so fun to be on the other side of the microphone and not have to worry about putting the ads out there, making sure the intro's right, making sure you did hit click live, go live twice. It's
been there, done that.
Oh yeah, so have I. Frankie Head Cheese from golly, how am I? Frankie Paulafront. Why am I forgetting? Slay Nation. Jeez, good Lord, Frankie, don't be mad at me now because I knows he listens. Anyway, I did that. Yes, but it is fun to be on the other side of the microphone. So when we're able to go on other folks' podcasts, we get to sit back and relax. We don't have to worry about anything. And we get to tell our story. And we'll have guests that ask about our story on our podcast. Well, we have told it 1,000,000 times on Bass and Brews, and we try to just skim over it real quick because our folks have heard that. And that's not what they're here for. They can hear our stuff. They're here for the guests. So it's really nice to be able to sit back and relax and not have to prepare for anything and just talk and answer questions. And I am good at talking.
Yes, you are. So other than a podcaster, you know, I could see that if you had to stand up in front of people and give a sermon, I believe you might be good at that too. But I don't really know much about your religion background. That's not a conversation that we've had on the water. But give us a synopsis of what you believe and how that goes for you.
Good story. I did stand up and give a sermon a couple times. One by myself, sermon to my little Presbyterian church. So Macby, South Carolina, Macby Presbyterian Church, oldest church in town. Cool thing about going to that church was the preacher. I can't remember. Preacher Ed is what we called him. Reverend Dr. Ed now. He's no longer there. But anyway, I'll kind of dive into him in a second. But I can't remember when he came there. I was at elementary school, probably a fifth or sixth grade. I don't know. It doesn't matter. He was a football coach of mine. He was a younger reverend at the time, came from Presbyterian College up there in the upstate of South Carolina. And he was a football coach, and I was a quarterback, and he was a quarterback in college, and he was my quarterback's coach. And so, you know, when you kind of think about your preachers, a lot of times you think about the short old gray haired man that's, you know, he ain't out there throwing footballs to the DBs or the running backs, or, you know, have the hitting dummy on. Excuse me. So I was lucky in that sense that I got to relate with somebody that loved football. You know, I played 3 or 4 sports in high school too. It wasn't just football, but that was the one I loved. So I got to go with that, and it was a small, so he ran our youth group. I mean, he did everything. It was a small church. And so I grew up going Presbyterian church, and they would always once a year.
Bluetooth disconnected.
Uh-oh.
Bluetooth connected.
Uh-oh. You hear that? See? I got all this stuff. This is my office. I'm out here in my 110-degree garage, and things are starting to act a fool in here. Stop it, Bluetooth. The youth group every year would run a one of our church services. We called noon service, and we'd preach. So I stood up there. I was the preacher one Sunday for sure. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. I got to prepare for it, and, you know, wrote my sermon out and did the preaching. It was great. But my journey through that was growing up in this small church with a young preacher that was my football coach that also liked to play golf with my pawpaw. I played golf. He loved to garden. I had gardens. So, you know, I spent a lot of time doing stuff with him that in this little small town that we did with everybody. So, you know, got to really see a different side of your brethren. But I grew up through Presbyterian, and, you know, once I left that from a faith journey perspective, once I left that and came to the Chapel area, I had a hard time finding a church. I ended up not stopping going to church because I had what I wanted, or what I had, I could not find.
Yeah.
And bigger churches, bigger areas, you know, kind of just feeling weird about it. And so I went years and years without really not doing church. I kept in touch with Preacher Ed. Matter of fact, when we got married, I proposed to my wife, and when we sat down and started planning the wedding, I told her, I said, the wedding is yours. I don't care what you do, where we have it. I don't care. I have 3 requests. 1, Preacher Ed marries us. And the other 2, I don't know yet. And I never came up with 2 more. That was it. And we ended up, at this point in time, he was in Princeton, West Virginia, which he's still at. We drove up, kind of met halfway, and did some, you know, pre-marriage counseling halfway, and got to meet him and had him down to marry us. But I didn't really find another church that I enjoyed going to until we were in North Augusta, South Carolina. We found the Methodist church there, and we started going. We really liked it, and we didn't know this at the time, but they were in the transition of getting a new preacher. And the new preacher came in, was a young guy, my age, late at this point in time, kind of late 30s. And so we spent a lot of time at that church and before we moved back here. And, you know, it was good. I enjoyed the family aspect of it. That church family is something that you can always call upon. You know, you need help moving. Those folks are there. Somebody's going to be there. If you need help moving, you need help cooking, you do a church function, you know, and everybody kind of has a role that they know what their role is. And so I love that about being at mainly these two churches, because that's the ones I spent most of my time at, is that like there were always things that were going on, and the people that were doing them, everybody had a role and they played that role and they knew it. And it was just great. It was great fellowship and it was fun. And so, you know, I grew up with faith in mind and being true to yourself and being true to what you worship. And if you do that, then your faith is going to carry you throughout life to be successful. We all have to have something to believe in, and we all have to have something that guides us. Because we can't guide ourselves, and other people can't guide us. So you have to build your faith upon everything that you've learned through what you've been able to do. And so when you have people in your church life and your family life that can help you put your faith and your guidance together, then what that does, I mean, that prints out a map for you to be who you want to be and who you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Let's take a second. Let's do these last couple of commercials here and talk about some lures. And then we are going to end up with a few questions that we ask everybody.
Mr. B Lure Company is making high-quality handcrafted lures and has been for 30 years, right here in the U.S. Using all-metal components, owner and gamakatsu hooks, and silicone or frog hair skirts, Mr. B is pumping out some awesome spinnerbaits, jigs, buzzbaits, underspins, and more, including some of the most unique bladed jigs on the market. To fill up your tackle box, go to MrBLureCompany.com, that's MRBLureCompany.com, and use promo code faithnfishnpod1x10 at checkout to save 10% on your first order. That's faith the letter N, fish the letter N, P-O-D, so Faith and Fishing Pod, just like our Instagram handle, 1x10. If finesse fishing is your comfort zone, something you want to learn better this year, or just something you like to tie on as a Hail Mary pass, Jade's Jigs has everything you need and more, and it's all eco-friendly and lead-free. With an awesome selection of baits and colors, they've got a variety of techniques covered for you. Finesse jigs, underspins, Nico weights, Ned rigs, and more are all waiting for you at jadesjigs.com. And while you're there, use promo code FNF10 for 10% off your purchase. That's jadesjigs.com and promo code FNF10 for 10% off.
All right, Paul. So tell me about your favorite fishing story or fishing memory in 300 words or less.
Man, look, I know you didn't invite me on, but I know you knew I was coming on. And
I'm just messing with you, dude.
I done talked to Cam about this before now. I done told him, look, y'all should have known better. Invite me on here. Y'all should have had Alex on to keep me in check. His sole job was to be like, all right, Paul, that's enough. Next segment.
I thought like you guys' questions at the end though are just shotgun, right? Isn't that what you guys are, just a shotgun round at the end, right? Okay, right. Well, I don't want it completely shotgun, but I'm just messing with you, man. Take all the time you want. I already knew when I saw that you were going to be on. I even told my wife, I was like, you can go ahead and go to sleep tonight because I don't know what time I'm going to be done.
Look, every podcast that go on, I want to shoot for the longest episode ever. But you know, I do value your time as much as you value it. But our shotgun round is a shotgun round. The only shotgun part of it is we're going to ask you a question. We want your answer like that, split second. But
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, if we don't like it, we're going to dive into it. And that's why our podcast end up going like the shotgun round ends up being 30, 45 minutes when it's the end of the podcast because we dive into questions or our guest dives into questions. But
So I'm going to prolong this just one more second because you guys can probably see this on your analytics. So on your shotgun rounds, does your listeners, does it go up? Are you getting more percentage listening on the end of those? Because I think to me, that's one of my favorite parts of you guys' episode is to hear everybody's different answers, whether it's broccoli on the sandwich or cucumber or whatever it's going to be.
Spinach ain't a protein, people.
Yeah.
Spinach is not a protein. So diving into some of our analytics for our podcasts are, let's say they average 2 hours. They're usually hour and 45 minutes to hour and a half. I know that ain't average, but let's just say 2 hours is about average. We have, last time I checked, I haven't checked in a while, but last time I checked, or when Alex talked, our retention rate's about 87%. So that means the people listening is 87% into a long form podcast. And that's pretty good. Look, we don't know nothing. We just say it's pretty good because people said it's pretty good. We don't really compare it to anybody. But yeah, we have about 87% retention rate to the end of that. I think this is the shotgun round. This is Alex's baby. He came up with that, and the majority of questions that we still ask are some of the same questions that he's asked. There's only one question that has been added since then is, do you eat beaver? And that came from one of my episodes.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, all those questions are things that have been there from the beginning. Alex just needed me to really scramble his egg. Look, all right, let me ask you this, Robert. Have you ever gone and said, you know what, I'm gonna cook me 3 fried eggs. I want some fried eggs. I want fried eggs this morning. You go, you get your pot heated up, you throw some butter in there, some olive oil, you throw your eggs in there, and like 30 seconds later, you're sitting at them, they start to turn, all the whites are starting to turn white. You're like, you know what, I want scrambled eggs. So then you do a country scramble, right? So if you don't scramble your eggs in a bowl with a fork or a whisk, if you scramble them in the pan that you cooking them in, that's called a country scramble. So you start scrambling them up there, right? So you got whites and yellows or orange, depends on if you got good eggs or not. And so it's a country scramble. So it ain't a fried egg, but it ain't a true scramble. Yeah, country scramble. Well, that's what I did to Bass and Brews podcast. When Alex brought me on, he was over there making these like immaculate Gordon Ramsay scrambled eggs. And then, I don't know, Bobby Flay immaculate fried eggs. I came in there and just ruined it all and made country scramble.
Hey, that's why that works. That's why that works, though.
So you know, the question, those questions, all the base of that podcast is what he built it on. And those shotgun round questions are a reason that we have a lot of people in there because the answers can be so funny. That a simple question, Crocs or flops. There's not many times we don't dive into the Croc or flop debate.
Yep. That's true. And I mean, we all know your Crocs, no socks all the way. And I did see your post about these new work shoes you have. Whether you got work shoes now, no socks. So you're going to have to start a new deal on that.
I hadn't worn my Crocs in a while fishing because I went to Zero Sandals, Xero, Zero Sandals. And they're a basic thong sandal. And that's what I've been wearing fishing over the Crocs. And look, man, I'm not sure if I'm going to buy another pair of Crocs. I got to see how long these cross kicks hold up in a work environment that I'm wearing now. Because one of the little knobs on the side of it's already torn. So I got to see how long they're going to. Look, I don't like shoes. I don't like socks. I'll tell you, I go barefoot 99% of the time at home. I will leave out of the house and go to the gas station or store to get something. I'll show up and I'll get out of my truck and I'll go, I got the shoes on.
Yeah.
But you know what? I walk into the store. Ain't nobody told me to leave yet.
Yeah, they're pretty good at Sheets. They'll let you get whatever you need.
Oh yeah, Sheets ain't never said nothing. Anyway, all right. So what we talking?
Favorite fishing story or favorite fishing memory?
In 300 words or less.
Yeah, I was just kidding about that.
I know. In 2008, when I was back living in Hartsville, South Carolina, which is right near my town, I had this old farm pond. It's about 15 acres I grew up fishing in. Always had huge fish, huge brim, huge bass. It is, it's these pure spring, 2 spring fed. It is, Chickasaw remix, can't talk. It is fed by 2 natural springs, Blackwater, Tannic water, just unbelievable fish habitat. 2008, I'm fishing there with my boss at the time at Carolina Sandhills Wildlife Refuge, Mark Parker. And I went and fished this lake all the time when I was back down there. Caught some big fish that year. So like May to August, I mean, we caught, every time we went, we were catching something 5 to 7 pounds. I mean, I'd had 3 people catch their PB. I mean, we're catching just big fish, a lot of fish too. Anyway, we're out there, heavy coontail, so matted grass, and I know the lake, I know the little pond pretty well, and so we're kind of fishing. There's a channel that runs through it, so I'd fish that channel, and I'd work up to the coontail, and I'd throw a little spook puppy between the coontail. The week before, I was throwing that, and I had a big fish roll up on it, missed it. I'm like, that's a big fish. The guy that was with me threw a spinnerbait in right behind it, almost 8 pounds. It's 7.75 or something, almost 8-pounder. I'm like, man, that's great. Blah, blah. I was happy for him. But then again, I was like, that's my fish house. Week later, me and Mark are fishing. We're catching a good many fish, nothing huge. Anyway, I throw spook out there, pop it, walking the dog back. All of a sudden, something rolls on it. Doesn't bite it, just rolls on it. I'm like, good Lord. And he sees it too. So I see it, obviously. He sees it. I look over and I was like, Mark wasn't the guy that caught the other fish the week before. This is a whole new guy. I look at Mark though, but I was like, do not throw over there. And I was like, was that a carp? And he goes, I don't know. I said, well, do not throw over there. So I threw my spook back over there. I got 8-pound 8-pound Trilene XT on, right? This ain't no braid, no nothing. Spook Junior, I twitched it like 3 times, and it looked like a brim ate it. Set the hook, and it couldn't dive because it was coontail all below it. It was like coontail everywhere. Couldn't dive. But it was kind of, you could see it. It wasn't jumping, but this fish was just kind of flopping around and swimming around above the coontail. I'm like, dude, this is a big fish. And we're in a 12-foot John boat with, at the time, I think I had a little like 40-pound thrust trolling motor at the front of it. And it was hard to get over there because coontail and everything. We're having to paddle around this coontail. Anyway, we end up pulling the boat to the fish. It took like 6 minutes to get this fish. We get there, and the fish sees the boat and kind of swims off towards Mark at the back of the boat. And I'm like, get it. He reaches down and lips it, and he looks up at me and was like, oh, my God. I'm like, pull it in the boat. He lifts it up, and I start shaking. It's huge. Biggest fish I've ever seen in my entire life in person. Ended up being 10 pounds and 1 ounce.
Oh, wow.
Ginormous fish. I've got a picture of it. Matter of fact, I'm so lucky. At the time, I had just bought a Palm Pilot. You remember the Palm Pilot?
Oh, yeah. I remember.
I had just bought a Palm Pilot. And so we were able to take a picture of me holding this 10-pound. And this was August, mid-late August of 2008. And just the look on his face, and then he brought it up out of the water because he was he reached down, he was, elbow deep in the water getting it. And his face, after he put it in his hands and started bringing it up, his face, I mean, it's like slow motion as he stood up with it. And then
it's almost like a Jack Black face, when Jack Black always has that face, and he turns around and does the deal there.
I mean, a 10-pound, people say, oh, he's in a 4-pump. Well, I don't care. It's still matter, a 10-pound fish.
Yeah.
I mean, look, so, but just like the slow-mo and how I remember still to this day. Yeah, I remember a lot about that first ever bass I caught my pawpaw at the hog pond. But this one here, because it was so big, let's be honest, because it was a double-digit fish, just hits different on an angler side. I mean,
no doubt.
So it's in my mind, and every now and again I'll text him. I'm like, hey man, you remember that 10-pound fish I caught?
That's always good to bring up. So what about your favorite scripture? What's your favorite scripture out of the Bible?
I listen to this podcast and I go through, and every time y'all ask this question, it always goes back to one, and it's 1 Corinthians 13. And the sole reason that it's there is because in the house I grew up in our bathroom, there was our little one sink vanity. Then there was a little void that our towels were on this little rack, and above that rack, the void was between the vanity and the bathtub. And the picture above that little rack that held like washcloths and soap and towels and stuff was 1 Corinthians 13. I cannot repeat it. Love is kind. Love is, everybody knows the verse of 1 Corinthians. It was that. And so growing up I was in that house from the time I was born to the time I graduated high school, 18 years. I saw that every time I was in the bathroom. And so that one, again, nothing spectacular, right? It's something nobody's heard of. It's probably one of the most liked and quoted out there. But that one was just there, and it was a Bible verse. And I'm pretty sure it had like a goose and a deer. It was some kind of 1980s print with a goose and a deer and some other flowers and stuff on it, and then that verse.
It's funny how you can remember, things like that, as a kid, the church that we went to, I can remember the 10 Commandments were behind where the preacher stood, and, somebody had done like burn them in wood. And I can remember that, and we didn't go to that church, that particular church. We didn't go to, probably I may have been 7 or 8 years old, but I can still remember, all of that listed. It's funny how your mind picks those things out, and those things just stick with you. What about your favorite Bible story? What would that be?
I have a lot of these. Mine, I would go back and forth between Daniel and the lion's den and David and Goliath.
Yeah, one of those two.
One of those two. I mean, it's hard to pick. I wouldn't pick. I'd say both of those. They're the same. They're a different story, but they're the same. They're the same purpose, right? Is that nothing is outside of your reach. Nothing is too big. There's nothing you can't do. We fail at a lot of stuff. I failed at a lot of stuff. Did I feel like a failure? Yes. But that was a learning experience. Instead of the failure, what do I take from that to improve on who I am or improve on the next endeavor? And I look at both of those stories as that kind of epiphany of that. You don't have to excel, or you don't have to be successful, quote unquote, successful at something to succeed.
Right.
Just because you failed at riding a skateboard, what did you learn that maybe makes you great at riding a bike? You know, so those stories really show you that regardless of what you think the odds, because the odds against you are always what you think they are. So what you think those odds are, they're way less than what they are.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So these next two questions, I always have a hard time trying to figure out how to ask these. So I'm going to ask both of these together.
I know what they are. I'm going to answer them the same way. So you answer them because I already know my answer, and the way you're going to ask them is perfect.
Okay. So for your favorite fish to fish for is
bass.
Kind of before the bite.
Largemouth bass. You don't even have to keep doing largemouth bass.
Okay. And then the favorite one to catch.
My favorite fish to catch is largemouth bass. Okay. The favorite fish to fish is largemouth bass. I do not want to go catch crappie. I don't want to go catch brim. I don't want to go catch catfish. If I'm at Sharon Harris and I start catching catfish and perch, I'm leaving. I don't care how big the perch are. You know what? I've tried to go out to Sharon Harris, and when I catch a perch or two, I'm like, you know what? They're here. I'm going to take them home. We're going to have fried perch tonight. You know what? I saved 2 fish, and I get back to the boat ramp 8 hours later, and I still got 2 perch that are dead, floating in some kind of cooler that I poured all of my food and ice out of, and my towel wrapped around my head when I get hot. But no, man, I want to catch bass. I say largemouth because we ain't got those smallies here. We'll broaden it. I want to favorite fish to catch is bass, and the favorite fish to fish for is bass. That's what I want to catch. That's what I go out there for. And if I go out there for something else, it better be with somebody who goes out there to catch those fish, to have a good time. Because otherwise, I'm like, I could be out here trying to catch bass instead of catfish in 112-degree weather in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it's a lot more satisfying to trick a bass than it is any other kind of fish. I totally agree with you. So I should have made it a 3 for favorite fish to eat. Is that going to be bass as well? Because I know you're not scared to fry one up.
No, man. Here's the deal: is part of what we've come to as bass anglers is the fear and the dread of keeping and eating bass. And I tell people all the time, I will fry crappie, I'll fry catfish, and I'll fry bass, filleted, and I will be willing to bet 99% of the people couldn't tell. They couldn't pick out the difference. Catfish is probably the one that most people would pick out. But if you had filleted crappie and filleted bass, 99% of people wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially the crappie and the bass.
Yeah.
You know, if you get a catfish that's got a little bit of gray in it, you can tell. But crappie and bass are pretty similar, and crappie is one of the best eating fishes, I think. So
I love the crappie. You know, I pick on Bass and Brews about eating the best bass caviar, the 8-pounders and up, and the best ones to fillet are 8-pounders because they're the easiest to fillet and you get the biggest, but. No, there's something to say about keeping, and at least in our area, 14 inches and below. Yep. You have a 5-fish limit for a reason. You can keep those fish, and they are good eating. You don't have to fillet them. You can take those fish, and you don't have to de-ed them. My son, Carter, he loves fish with their heads on them. When we cook fish, he's like, "Can I have the head on mine?" And so I gut them, and we deep fry with the head on them. But look. Any brim, bass, crappie, catfish. I love some carp balls. Catch some carp, make some carp balls. I mean, I've eaten suckerfish growing up. People cook suckerfish a certain way. I just like having how it is. I love deep fried fish. What are you doing, Robert? Is your dog running away, or what is going on? Is your parrot loose?
No, it's the dog. He keeps busting in the office. Which is fine, but I know he's going to get tangled up in these cords.
He's going to end up ripping the computer off. Yeah,
probably so. But if it ends suddenly, you'll know why. It's because Mikey has wrecked the podcast studio.
Well, at least he's not barking. That's being a good dog.
Oh yeah, no, he doesn't. He doesn't bark.
Yeah, eating fish. I like crappie carp or crappie brim bass. And catfish, I'll eat those. I love them deep fried into nuggets. I will eat them until I bust.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like all the seafood. And speaking of eating, the next one is right up your alley. Favorite fishing snack? What you got for me?
Man, look, I don't eat on the water typically, rarely. If I may hit a gas station early in the morning to get, whatever, I might grab a little Slim Jim or something. Or if I probably got 3-year-old Slim Jims in my truck, all up under the seats. If I happen to find one of those, I might throw it in the kayak. But when I'm fishing, I have to remind myself to drink. Yeah, I don't eat a lot. I mean, I don't want to have tummy issues. Like, I want to be going. I don't have to go find a spot on the bank to do my business. But again, to me, every cast is important. Every cast is a fish. And if I got a Slim Jim or a granola bar, a piece of jerky in my hand, or that's one less cast I get to make. But it's also part of the ADD stuff. Is I'm dialed in. My wife will text me at 1:00 in the afternoon, like, "Hello." I'm like,
"Yeah,
look, woman, we've been together like 23 years.
You already know
I'm fishing. You don't have to say hello. You could just say, hey, can you please update me? I mean, I got a text 3 weeks ago. It's like, you know what? When you say you're going to be home at 11 and it's 2:30, I'm just going to assume you're dead and start calling the police."
Yeah, and a lot of times I'll look up and not even know the time. I'm like, what the heck? Where did the day go?
Well, you must be catching fish, because that never happens to me. I'm like, golly, it's been 8 hours. I've got 2 bites.
What about the favorite body of water? What are you going with?
Man, look, Sharon Harris. I want to go to Sharon Harris. A lot of people hate Sharon Harris since the grass is gone. The fish are still there. They're still big fish, but I'll tell you what, it's not even the big fish at Sharon Harris. That lake will humble you. You will go there some days and catch them, and then some other days
you won't get a bite.
More often than not, you can't even catch a perch. And Sharon Harris has some of the biggest perch you will ever catch, and they are plentiful. But there's nothing like fishing Sharon Harris from August to October, when you get on these mega schools out on these main lake points, busting on shad, and it looks like the water is boiling. That is some of the most fun fishing I've ever had my entire life.
It is.
Getting out on Sharon Harris and getting into these mega schools, and they're like 2 to 4 pounders.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and the 2 pounders are hefty. Like, I mean, strong fish. You can catch them on a top water, a spinner bait, a spoon. I mean, almost anything. And just being around, especially in a kayak, being around that where they're busting in the boat, where you could put a net in each hand to stick it out there and probably get 2 or 3 at a time.
Yep.
I mean, Sharon Harris is my favorite lake to fish around here, and it's 15 minutes from the house.
Yeah, that's the same with me too. I'd probably give Jordan the edge. I've caught my PB on Jordan. I always catch more fish on Jordan, but Harris is closer. And a lot of times I'll go to Harris because it's closer, knowing I probably won't catch as many fish. But if you get 2 or 3 at Harris, they're going to be 2 or 3 nice ones. Yeah. Or you can go to Jordan and you can catch, 7 or 8, but you might not get that, the size you're going to get at Harris. So what about your favorite lure? I probably know the answer to this one, but
I don't know if you do, man. I tell you what, it's changed a lot over the last 2 years. If you would ask me this 2 years ago, I'd tell you a Czar spook. Then really started changing because I wanted to beat the bank and burn the bank that first year in 2021. And then I realized Sharon Harris taught me this. In the summertime, beating the bank on Sharon Harris is futile.
Yes.
It ain't gonna work. And so I transitioned that, and obviously started, I was learning too. I wasn't ever an offshore angler. I started learning and really learning offshore and learning how to run my technology so I could fish offshore. But I will tell you right now, a drop shot.
No kidding. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, and you know what? If people know me and have fished with me the last couple of years, they probably wouldn't think that. So 2 years ago, it would have been a spook. last year it would have been a shaky head, and now I'm telling you a drop shot, and you can see a progression there. I lost a tournament last year on a guy fishing a shaky head 10 feet from me at the place that I told him to go. And I was fishing a square bill and all this other crap, and he was fishing a shaky head, caught 3 fish in front of me and beat me. And so that was the Sharon Harris tournament, where it was a 2-day tournament last year because the weather was so crappy.
Right.
And then so that year I said, I'm going to learn how to fish shaky head. And then, so last year I was shaky head in the drop shot, but I'll this past tournament, here's a good example. I love the drop shot because if the wind's blowing, if it's 30 foot or if it's 10 foot, I feel comfortable going out there and taking a drop shot and being able to feel the ground contact and feel that bite. Shaky head, I'm not as confident in that. But here's a good example. 2 weeks ago, we had our CCKF Raleigh Rumble. I fished Lake Johnson, never been there. I lost the 17, 18 incher. Best it would have done is put me in 6th or 5th instead of 6th. But I need a limit. I needed 3 more fish. So I just started running the bank with a drop shot. And I was throwing it up to the bank. I'd pull it 2 or 3 times, no fish. I was, power fishing the drop shot. And I caught my limit and actually caught up 2 fish. That got me into 6th place. If I hadn't have done that, who knows? I mean, it's fishing, right? But
yeah,
that has become the drop shot and the shaky head. I do not go fishing. If I say I'm going to go fish and learn how to fish a swim bait, I still take a drop shot to shaky head. I still take those 2 every time I go, because I want to see when I get those fish, if I see them on side scan or down imaging, I want to be able to drop one of those down. If I can't get them to bite what I'm practicing on, at least I want to say, hey, how does this drop? How's this going to work in that scenario? But yeah, drop shot right now, I don't leave home without it. And it's the rod that I pick up the most, definitely in a tournament setting, because I feel like I can be a lot more accurate off of my side scan and down imaging to target those fish. And I think that you can get those fish to bite in time with something like a drop shot. You can dead stick it, and at some point, something's going to suck it in.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. I thought you were going to say a bladed jig, jackhammer, or spinner bait. Because and I'll tell you why. Because the time we launched at the Eno, and you had to leave that day, and I was fishing so slow, and here you come. I mean, you're slinging it from bank to bank, and you go up, I don't know, half a mile or so, and then 30 minutes comes by, and here I see Paul's coming back, just still slinging that thing bank to bank. And then, I think you were dog cussing both sides of the bank, and because you had to leave early and you hadn't got anything. And
I moved that day, and that was a square bill. That was a square bill. Yeah. I love a spinner bait, and I love a jackhammer or a bladed jig, but I'm going to throw a square bill before I throw one of those usually, because I like to throw in the wood. Mm-hmm. And so that square bill tends to come through that wood a lot better. And also the big rock, especially that chunk rock we get on Jordan. I love to throw a square bill in it. I tell you, if you're ever going to fish Jordan, here's a quick little tip about lures. If you're ever going to fish Jordan and you get into the rip wrap, or if you get on some of these big chunk rock points, and this is an unpaid endorsement, but the microchip Spro square bill, get it. Those little they have number 6 hooks on them, and so some of my square bills I put number 4s on because I like that bigger hook. I lose less fish. They don't bend them out as quick. Those little 6s will bend out, but that square bill in particular on that chunk rock with those number 6 trebles on them, they are less likely to get hung up. And when they do get hung up, all you got to do is just give your line some slack and just kind of jiggle it a little bit with slack on it, and they come through that chunk rock so much better. Little tip for Jordan or any chunk rock there with those. But yeah, that was a square bill, and man, I told you too. I passed you, and you caught like 4 or 5 fish on a wacky rig, and I was like, man, I don't like it. And I moved, and that move didn't do anything for me either. So it was just, I hate falls, man. I do not like falls.
Yeah, I did better the day before, pre-fishing than I did at
you
the
caught
tournament.
good fish the day before in the whole
the
the
day
exact
before
area we were in.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't even my
crazy.
second cast from the ramp when I was practicing. I think I was just kind of flipping it out there because my line was tangled up or something. I flipped it about 5 or 6 feet from the kayak, and all of a sudden it was like wham, and I'm like, oh man. But you already answered this a while ago, but the last question that was on there is favorite time of year to fish. I'm guessing it's going to be, the fall time on Sharon Harris would probably be a no brainer there.
Mine is fall, and we're going to incorporate that because here's the thing: when you live in this Raleigh area, you have fall, Sharon Harris, and Jordan. Even though MLF has been here twice in the last 6 years, these lakes are still, from a fishing perspective, are not pressured like some of these other lakes. That we're lucky that people still do not understand what falls in Jordan are right now. Because look, man, in the month of June, almost every tournament in the month of June at Jordan was like 27 plus pounds to win it.
Yeah,
that's insane. And then you get these early Jordan tournaments, it's taking 30 pounds to win. And I don't like falls, but falls is the same. It's not quite as consistent with those big bags, but there's still 24, 25, 26 pound bags at falls to win. That's crazy, man. So
yeah, we're lucky. We get a lot of local pressure, but there's not a lot of people traveling from out of state to fish these lakes. And it just doesn't get the publicity of like a Hartwell or Santee Cooper. Yeah, I'm fine with that too. Especially Harris, because you can't get more than 20 or 30 boats on there, and you're full up.
People can talk about the size of Harris. I can't remember. I think it's like 8,000 acres or something, maybe 11,000, whatever it is. Whatever it is actually smaller than what they say, because there's two huge creeks that you can't even fish because they're roped off for the plant. But my favorite time to fish is going to be fall, because that's 6-8 inch spoon, big old flutter spoon time. That's deep diving crankbaits. That's swing heads. I'm not a big jig angler, but I have been trying to fish a jig a lot more this year. But in general, I'm going to crank. I got a big spoon and I got a swing head on. And Sharon Harris, you're looking at the main lake points. You're looking for mega schools. Jordan, you're cranking in the fall. You're cranking the rock. You're cranking the roads. You're cranking the railroad beds. I mean, I like that stuff. It's a lot of casting. It's bomb casting. There's no accuracy involved. You're out there. You're the Nolan Ryan.
Yeah, just let it fly.
In the fall, you just go out there and throw it as hard as you can throw it, and then work it back. And I like that kind of fishing. You're using your graphs and stuff like that. But I really enjoy that time of year, and because of the type of fishing I get to do.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like the fall. Fall and the spring to me are pretty much tied. Anytime those bass are. Yeah, I like the spring too.
No, I suck at the pre-spawn and the spawn time period. I am terrible. Like, you got bank anglers putting up 20-pound days in the spawn, and I can't catch a fish. I suck at it. I hate it. I don't want to do it. Like, I want to go catch my fish. They don't necessarily have to be deep, but I do like to catch them offshore, and offshore doesn't mean deep. Offshore could be 8 foot of water, 200 yards off the bank. So, I like to get out there and kind of to target that kind of stuff. But, if I got to throw a jackhammer or a spinnerbait or square bill in and burn the bank, I'll do it. But I'm doing 100 miles an hour. I'm doing as fast in that kayak as most boats will go.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And we're really almost at the end of what we're doing here, but I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to get this ball rolling. It's something I've had rattling around in my head for a while, and I'm going to get your thoughts on it, and I'm going to make a clip of what we're about to talk about and put it on Instagram or maybe YouTube Shorts or whatever. But Paul Hills, Jabberhammer, what do you think of sometime in the fall we cook a whole hog and we get a bunch of content creators from North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, and any of these kayak anglers from the Carolinas that want to come. And you know what? I'll even go out there and say that I'm going to provide the hog and cook the hog if we can get some people on board with some type of meetup this fall on a weekend where we don't have a tournament going on or whatever. Oh, yeah, I know. I'm right there with you.
Look, Hoss, I'll tell you this right now. Yes, let's do it. Let's plan it. We'll cook a hog. I just showed y'all, for the people that are listening, not watching. I brought up a picture of a 120-pound hog I cooked for my 30th birthday. And I'm all for cooking a hog and doing some kind of meetup where there's some fishing involved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fellowship involved. But most importantly, the bad word now is networking. But there's no other way to say it besides networking. It is networking. There's nothing wrong with networking. But yeah, to put that on and to do that, I would be 100% in. I got a homemade rub that I've been making for about 15 years now. And the only reason I make it is because people told me it was good, and I give it to people all over the country, and they always ask for more. You know, I make some homemade sauces. Again, South Carolina, small town. I've eaten everything off a hog from the tooter to the pooter.
That's right.
I mean, I'm all down cooking hogs now. I am all down. I don't even have to fish. Let's just show up. Me and you will show up, cook a hog, because I love to cook. You know, I love to cook. I like to see people eat and be happy.
Yeah, and there's no other way to do it. I mean, besides when you get people around that have never been to a pig picking or where you're cooking this at. I usually do a couple a year in the backyard. I built a pit back there, and I do it in Tennessee where I grew up. We did it over the fire wood coals. So I've got a spot on the side where I shovel the wood coals, and I do it all by wood. And now this one, if we did a meetup, I'd get somebody with a cooker to come out there, and then we could cook it over propane because we wouldn't have that, at a meetup.
No, the heck with that propane now. We cook. No, me and you going to talk about this.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about it.
Look, we ain't cooking. We ain't wasting a whole hog on no propane. We cook hog. I'm telling you, we can make that work. But here's the thing. You said it's called a pig picking. And there's probably 98% of the country ain't never been to a pig picking where you show up, like you get your potato salad and your slaw and your rolls and whatever else, the other stuff they got out there. And then you walk up to the grill and you got somebody saying, what do you want? Do you want rib meat? Do you want loin meat? Do you want the butt? Do you want the ham? Do you want the jowl meat? Because the best part of the pig is the jowl and the tongue.
It's
and
good.
Obviously the bacon, the belly meat. But like when you go to a pig picking, you get to choose what you want. And hopefully somebody has that pig set up right where, they ain't mixing it all together. It ain't a bowl of soup. Anyway, we'll talk about that because we can make that work. And we ain't doing no propane, Robert. No propane.
Hey, I'm good with it.
In your backyard, we cook it.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it in the backyard. But there just ain't no place to fish in my backyard. So, we'll have to figure out.
They
go fishing while we cook the hog.
Yeah, they go fishing Sharon Harris. We cook the hog. They show up at your house. Sharon Harris is like 18 minutes from your house.
It's not even that far. Yeah.
So there we go. They can go fish at Sharon Harris. Great. And we can do it in kind of that late fall, early winter when the fish is still good, but all the crazy people ain't out on the water. And we ain't got to worry about it being too hot and the flies around. But we can make this happen, Robert. We can make it happen, Hoss.
All right, let's do it. I'm going to hit this outro button, and I'm not even going to do a wrap-up. I'm going to hit the outro. Everybody that's listening on the podcast, we appreciate you listening this long. Everybody that's watching on YouTube, like, subscribe. You guys go check out Bats and Brews podcast. If you haven't already, you're going to be entertained. It is one of the best 2 hours as far as podcasts go that you'll find. So we'll see you guys next week. And Paul, you can hang out a little bit afterwards, and we'll see what's going on. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Faith and Fishing is produced and hosted by Cam Steele and Robert Randolph, and is sponsored by Savior Outdoors, Jay's Jigs, Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle, Mr. B Lure Company, Atollas, and Omnia Fishing. Don't forget to join the Facebook community, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe, rate, and review us on whatever app you're listening on. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care, and God bless.